and welcome to Crossroads of Rockland History. I'm Clare Sheridan from the Historical Society of Rockland County. Thank you for tuning in. Today we'll turn our attention to Peggy Shippen, otherwise known as Mrs. Benedict Arnold. I'll be speaking with Char Weigel, a prominent New York historian and the Vice President of Special Projects for Revolutionary Westchester 250. She specializes in the American Revolutionary War in the Hudson Valley and is widely recognized for her primary source research on Benedict Arnold's treason and the capture of Major John André. Char will be coming to the Historical Society in September to speak about Peggy Shippen, so I'm delighted that she's joining me today. The Historical Society of Rockland County is a nonprofit educational institution and principal repository for original documents and artifacts relating to Rockland County. Our headquarters are a 4-acre site featuring a history museum and the 1832 Jacob Lovelt House located at 20 Zucker Road in New City, New York. It's listed on the National Register of Historic Places and a designated New York State Path Through History site. And part of our broad and challenging mission is to share the history of Rockland County with the public. If you like this program, I hope you will consider making a tax-deductible contribution. The Historical Society relies on financial support from people just like you. If you're interested in donating or becoming a member of the Society, please visit our website, rocklandhistory.org. Char Weigel regularly lectures on the complex history of Benedict Arnold's wife, separating fact from fiction regarding the extent of Peggy Shippen's involvement in his famous treason plot. I'm delighted to welcome Char Weigel to Crossroads today. Hi, Char, and thank you so much for being here today. Before we begin speaking about Peggy Shippen and your presentation at the Historical Society, take a moment and just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I am 10 years new to the Hudson Valley area, moved here from Philadelphia, and I have a background in teaching at the high school and the university level and have really been fascinated with Revolutionary War history for some time. So locally, I am very involved with Revolutionary Westchester 250, a volunteer nonprofit getting Westchester County ready for the Semiquincentennial, and also the board of the Odell House Rochambeau Headquarters Museum, where we're saving and preserving the house that quite a bit happened in during the Revolutionary War.
When did you become involved in researching the André Arnold plot?
It is entirely possible that I first learned from the Brady Bunch. You remember poor Peter who didn't want to portray Arnold in the school play? But, living in Philadelphia and teaching history in that city, which has really, it's almost like you're stepping back to Revolutionary War time, giving the preservation of the battlefields and buildings. So I was volunteering as an educator at the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, and I began to delve into the Shippen family archives and kind of got hooked.
For the very few listeners who are not aware of this conspiracy, can you just briefly describe it?
Yeah, trying not to get pulled into like all the fascinating twists and turns. Benedict Arnold, one of the most effective American generals, at a time really in the war when Washington was losing, Arnold pretty much was singularly responsible for turning the tide at the stalemate of Saratoga and for the Americans winning that important battle at a time when Washington really needed it. And then that win at Saratoga also brought in our French allies. So Arnold is truly one of the most important generals to Washington, but he doesn't get credit. He doesn't get compensated. He's grievously injured for the second time in the same leg at Saratoga. He had been earlier injured in the battle in Quebec. Shortly after that, he's going to be court-martialed, which greatly offends his pride, even though he's only kind of lightly reprimanded. So there's a lot of reasons that we know and some that we don't know. And he makes the decision to betray not just his chosen country, but his personal relationship with Washington as well. And he begins a secret correspondence with the British. And in the process of that, he convinces Washington to appoint him to be Commandant of West Point. So the plan is to help the British take control of the Hudson, which likely would have ended the war in their favor. And his chief contact for this year plus of negotiation through secret letters is a dashing, handsome, popular young British officer, Major John André, who is the adjutant general, aka assistant to British commanding general Sir Henry Clinton. And André and Arnold meet in the dead of the night on the shore of Haverstraw. And then André ends up being stranded, unable to return by the boat that brought him up. So he heads out overland through Westchester County, where he is captured near Tarrytown by three honest militiamen. And he's found to be carrying papers that really would have been the blueprint for the British attack on West Point. And then everything unravels for both André and Arnold over the course of 2 days. And Arnold ends up dramatically escaping, really in the nick of time. And the captured André is executed as a spy in Japan.
Thank you. That was an excellent summary of it. So, were you always curious about Peggy Shippen and the role she played in this plot?
I don't think so. I think initially I was just soaking up this grand sweep of a story about, a hero gone bad and a shocking betrayal, and wrestling, I think, with the questions that most of us have. And I don't think we ever will fully understand, which is like, why did he do it? And then I started bumping into fiction and nonfiction that was taking the stand on his young wife, Peggy Shippen. Some of them, a very few actually, were kind of the innocent babe motif, but most of them were the evil temptress, Eve in the garden with the apple kind of thing. And, it's that dichotomy sometimes into which women in history are cast. And as I'm reading this, I'm wondering, well, how do they know what was in her mind? And did Arnold really turn because his wife wanted more frilly ribbons? And so those kind of pat explanations weren't kind of passing the smell test of what I knew about Arnold. And then I started to read her letters and began to get a sense of the woman, who she was becoming over time. And I mean, like actually becoming, because she was maturing in the course of time that we have primary sources on her, but also becoming to me as I was finding out more and more about her. And my curiosity really exploded from that point on.
She really knew both Major Andre and Benedict Arnold, of course, in different ways, but this makes her an intriguing person in this event. Did you find originally when you started researching about Peggy Shippen that there was a lack of information, a lack of valuable research that had already been done?
Yeah, absolutely. And there still is. It's not just like the negative space of wanting and needing more primary sources, but it's also the fact that there's so many works of fiction that have cast her into a role, which is almost universally Peggy, the woman who pushed Benedict Arnold to become a traitor. And that portrayal was sticky, and a lot of people, read it somewhere and then feel they understand that. And I think just in general, finding information on women, of course, is a challenge in history. I have to tell you that one of the podcasts, of your podcasts, I enjoyed the most was about the Conklin family and really leveraging those incredible diaries and primary sources to understand the women in that family, not just the men. So that's the kind of thing that I wish we had more of.
Yeah. And your work is primarily with original source material. So what kinds of things did you look for when you began researching those primary sources about Peggy Shippen?
Yeah, family letters for sure. That was a huge piece of it. And thank goodness many, and people wrote a lot back then. I mean, we're talking cousins and removed family members writing as well. Military letters, orderly books, deeds, wills, in her case, court cases, period newspapers, journals, diaries. And, I really wanted to know not just about Peggy, but the context, like what Arnold, the people he were using as bridge agents to reach the British, what André, what they were doing. And the situation surrounding them all, because of course that was Peggy's situation as well. And a lot of that information is still not yet understood and known.
After all the research you've done, what do you think are the most misunderstood characteristics of Peggy Shippen?
A lot. One thing, her financial literacy, which was exceptional for the time and even now, I think you'd be pretty impressed by her grasp of the bond market. Her courage when she initially tried to leave Arnold, and then she had to find a way to make a life with him when she was forced to live with him. Um, the real mental health challenges that she faced. I think people really truly don't understand that, but it became quite clear in her writings. And then I think her honesty, and that's going to sound weird to talk about honesty because a lot of people believe she deceived Washington and others in faking her hysteria. I mean, we can talk about that if you want, about the possibilities of what was really happening. Um, but she and her father made a pact to be honest with each other, especially at the time when they knew their relationship was probably from that point on when she was banished from Philadelphia only to exist through letters. And so there's decades of letters in which she was really deeply honest with him. And she told her father things that, being a parent, thinking about being separated by an ocean and letters coming with pauses of weeks to months. I think that he must have been left hanging and worrying. But he had impressed upon her that he really wanted to know what was happening. So, letters at that time, again, were sort of the only way that relationships could continue for many people. And then she took that same approach into her own children. And so when her firstborn, Edward, was leaving, and I don't think she ever saw him after in person, to join the military in India. Her second son, James, was joining the military, going to be posted around the world. She had two stepsons in Canada. And in those letters, she would say, this is what's going on with me. And it wasn't always good stuff. And this is what I'm doing about it. And then she would sometimes overtly say, I tell you this because of our agreement, so that you should tell me what's really happening in your life. So I thought that was really fascinating to see.
When this all took place, when this plot took place, she was very young. And, that's what I always think about is when I think about the 19-year-old young women that I know or that I was myself, it's amazing that what she was involved in. And I mean, obviously times were different and people grew up a lot quickly, but talk to me about just how young she was.
I mean, 17 when she met him, right? And, I mean, I think about who I was at 17, and, there's a picture of her, a sketch that André captured. So she's just around 18 when she meets Arnold, but 17 when the British are occupying Philadelphia, and she and her social group of girlfriends is spending a lot of time with the British officers. And this picture, which is part of the first person portrayals I do with her, hair is like 2 feet high, and you can just see she was enamored with fashion. And that's kind of locked in people's minds, right? About how young she really was at that time. I think the way we think of her goes back to that kind of dichotomy, that characterization of women. Evidence says she did know about Arnold's treason while those letters were going back and forth with the British, playing sort of a secondary role. Did she make Arnold become a traitor? Well, I think we sell short Benedict Arnold and what we know about him if we wrap it all up in she made him do it theory. Did she even want to marry him? Like at her age, her father was heavily involved in picking her spouse. And there's some indications that she put up some resistance. Her father, though, was thinking he's going to marry his youngest daughter to an American general whose star was rising. So it would be a good, secure marriage for her. So, that whole time is very much early in her relationship with Arnold and her relationship with the British. is really defined by the fact that she was a teenager and the type of agency she had and didn't have at that time.
Their family was fifth generation family in Philadelphia. Is that correct? So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
so that's a lot of history being British. So,
Yeah.
and so I could see their loyalty being there because that's what they always were.
You're making a good point because they are like steeped in Philadelphia tradition. Her grandfather and great great grandfather were mayors of Philadelphia. Great great grandfather was appointed by William Penn, right? Which can't get more Philadelphia than William Penn. But it's interesting that by the time of the war, her family, her dad, Edward Shippen, was neutral. And the surrounding family were all heavily American. Her grandfather was just like, when a grandchild was born, like right kind of at the beginning of the war, he makes this kind of comment in a letter that, hopefully this will be the last child born before there's freedom, kind of. Her cousin is fighting with the Americans. Her father's cousin, Dr. William Shippen, is George Washington's chief of hospitals in New Jersey, in Rockland County area. And he's ambitious to be the chief of hospitals in Westchester as well. There's a lot of intrigue there. Tench Tillman, who is one of Washington's aides, one of the close aides, who's actually with Washington as Arnold's treason is discovered, is her cousin. So the family is heavily American, and her immediate nuclear family, with her dad being neutral, are the outliers. And then Peggy's falling in with this group of girlfriends who are all daughters of loyalist families in Philadelphia. So, there's all of these different layers and influences that are happening at the time.
You mentioned it a little bit before, but the one-dimensional aspect of Peggy Shippen is she was a naive victim, or she was the scheming mastermind that pushed her husband to do something awful. But as you said, she was way more complex than that. Has the research you've done given you additional insights into either the loyalists or the neutral people during the revolution?
Yeah. I mean, so much. Well, I mean, one thing, Claire, is that when you're doing research, I mean, how many hours, days, weeks, months do you spend kind of producing nothing in a way, right? You're looking for something and you can't find it. But that journey teaches you a lot about other things that were going on. So even when I'm looking for information on Peggy or Arnold, I'm getting a sense of what it's like to be in Philadelphia. So neutrals. So her family were original Quakers, like her great great grandfather, who William Penn appointed mayor, was a Quaker. But by the time we get to the fifth generation, they're not Quakers, but they're Quaker adjacent in a way because Philadelphia was such, and still is in some ways, a Quaker influence city. So you've got the British occupation. Her grandfather, the patriot, is staying out of town, but her dad's staying in town, trying to find a way to sort of work with the British that are there, but not go across the line. He's going to do the same when the Americans are there. The Quakers, though, are really struggling as theoretically neutral people. The Americans at one point have a night which was really terrifying to the Quaker population. They went through after a major loss, a battle loss, and they broke the windows in the houses of people who were Quakers and threatened to burn the houses. And a lot of the diaries and notes talk about how terrified the Quakers were. And this was because they were trying to stay neutral. And the loyalists, learning about the loyalists is also really, really fascinating. So I just came across this quote this week. General Charles Lee, American in Westchester, was writing to somebody who you could say was sort of like Peggy, socioeconomic, the wife of Frederick Phillips III, the last Lord of Phillipsburg Manor, Elizabeth Phillips. And Lee tells Elizabeth, anyone who does not take up arms and fight for the Americans are enemies. And those houses are going to be burned and the stock taken. So he's not leaving any daylight for neutrality at all. Like, if you are not for us, you are against us, and we are going to treat you like those who are actively taking up arms. And, the reverse was surely true as well. So, these loyalism, neutrality, these are political positions too, which I think are interesting to think about that. So we have a lot of evidence in Westchester and in Rockland County, and I know you know this, that loyalists who did not sign the oath to the new American government were disarmed and jailed. And I think a lot about that because this is for their political beliefs, right? And disarming someone meant you're taking away their goose gun, their
Mm.
personal musket that put food on the family. So you have a lot of loyalists from Rockland County because there was somewhat more of an American presence there, and tons of loyalists from Westchester, which is, the quote unquote neutral ground, which simply meant that neither side was in charge. A lot of these become refugees going to British occupied New York City. And then in Westchester, at least, you have Americans becoming, patriots becoming refugees going north of the Croton River, which was more reliably under American control. And Peggy herself becomes a refugee going to New York City when she's banished from Philadelphia. So, the story of refugees we think about at the end of the war, of course, thousands, free and enslaved Black people as well, going to Canada or to England. But this war was a massive movement of refugees during the time as well. And it's all caught up in patriotism and loyalism.
In the letters that you read and the diaries and so forth, do you feel like you got additional insights into Benedict Arnold and John André from those as well?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Arnold is the gift that keeps on giving, right? Like, there's so much to think about regarding him. So I could see quite a bit of evidence where he really values Peggy, but then he goes and he fathers a child out of wedlock, right? He really respects her financial acumen, and he makes her the only executor of his will, sole executor. So most executors are male, and there's often two or three, and it's just Peggy. But he leaves her in debt at a time when debtor's prison was a real thing. So, as you learn about this situation, you think about who really was Benedict Arnold. He appears to show love for his wife and children, but I guess my current thought, just based upon where I am at the moment, is that he was reckless and he made decisions in the moment without thinking about the consequences to others. And in a way, maybe he believed he himself was above consequences. And, that kind of recklessness can make you a hero and work out until it doesn't, right?
Right, right. Yes. After she was banished from Philadelphia, that was, of course, a trying time for her. What ended up happening to Peggy Shippen?
Yeah, like our view of her kind of is frozen in that moment of her being this teenager, right? And maybe being the temptress behind him. But she moves to England with Arnold. They have to leave after the defeat at Yorktown. It's found that Benedict Arnold is not safe even within the British lines. She is viewed quite positively. Queen Charlotte lets it be known that she favors Peggy, and the king gives her a pension. And the newspapers at the time say the same thing that newspapers said in the United States, that she is among the most beautiful women, like they're admiring her for her beauty. Very, very positive. Not so for Arnold at all. He is, love the trees and hate the traitor kind of thing is the reception that he gets. So that is a challenge for them navigating through this new country to them, really. They have four sons and a daughter who survived to adulthood. Peggy has two pregnancies in addition to that she loses the child. She turns out to be this incredibly caring mother, both to her stepsons, two surviving sons from his first marriage, who as adults are going to live in Canada, and to her own children in England. And Arnold puts the family into debt. And so, as I mentioned, in part of dealing with that after he dies in 1801. Peggy sells all their possessions. She fights a court case. Now, she has lawyers, but she's very actively involved in that. And the court case goes through appeals, and it's brought by a man that she refers to only as the Swede in her letters. And he was claiming that Arnold's actions as a privateer were not legal. And Peggy writes quite a bit, if this case does not go in our favor, I don't know what's going to happen to us. But her lawyers succeeded. They won the case. And so just before she dies at age 44, she writes with great satisfaction to the children that she has paid off the family's debts. And she goes through each child, and this is their plan for their path forward in life. She knew she was dying. So, I think about that, right?
Yeah.
And she really put the family to rights just in the nick of time.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I was listening to a fellow who wrote a book recently about Benedict Arnold. I think his last name is Kelly.
Oh,
And
yeah, Jack Kelly.
one of the things he said was that at the time that Arnold was plotting, that he really believed the best end for the war would be if we just let the British take over, and that would end the war, and that's what he really wanted to do. Is that something you agree with, or is that something you think is possible?
So first of all, I have immense respect for Jack Kelly. And as I have been doing this research and writing, I've reached out to him, and he's very, very clear that his deep dive was into Arnold, right to the point of Arnold's treason. So, and yes, I definitely accept what he's saying as a piece of it, right? Because Arnold himself writes after he has turned and he's on the British side, his strong belief, and he's constantly giving ideas for how the British can win the war, most of which are not really listened to and acted upon by the British. And, kind of the proof's in the pudding. He wouldn't have switched sides if he didn't think that side was going to win. And he was convinced that the Americans could not win it, especially if he switched sides, right? Like he was so important in his, yeah, in his view of himself. He said, thousands will come over with me. And I always think about the very first moment, like the first 10 minutes when he boarded the Vulture. And this is right in Haverstraw Bay, right? He's escaped with minutes to spare before Washington and his aides and everyone understands what has happened. And his crew on the barge that he told just row south. They normally would have been taking him back and forth from the Robinson House near Garrison, where they were staying, the family, to West Point on the west side. And he went down there that morning of the 25th of September, 1780, and said, just row south. And they get to the Vulture. And Arnold says, so, come on, boys, now you're going to turn with me. And the boat's crew refuse. And finally, it's the captain of the Vulture who says, like, okay, I'm not going to make them prisoners, which is really important because the British did not treat the American prisoners very well. Of course, we know about the prison ships, et cetera. But he's like, yeah, these were just innocent parties here. And the captain says they can go, and they go back. So the very first people that could have proven Arnold right, that thousands were going to follow him, refused to follow him.
Just an ego,
Yeah,
really,
yeah,
a
yeah,
lot of ego,
yeah,
both in
exactly.
André and Arnold, actually, I think.
I agree
Um,
too. Yes.
okay. What was the most surprising thing that you learned while doing your research about Peggy Shippen?
I mean, there was so much, right? So many surprises, but I think it was really learning about her mental health challenges. She was really honest about them in her letters. And we think about mental health today, it still carries such a stigma. Getting treatment is so hard. Well, imagine back then, right? No treatment, less understanding, but you can really understand what she's writing about, her symptoms and how she is experiencing life. And that was really interesting to me and not something that I have necessarily read a lot about, people writing about and being that honest about at that time.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, they would deem a woman, put a woman in an asylum for like saying the wrong word or, you know, not
Yeah.
combing her hair correctly. So, but at the same time, you're seeing the heart to heart letters with her father and so forth that really, where she's being brutally honest. So it's
Yeah,
interesting.
depression. And also when she describes, well, she'll use the word fit or whatever. I want to be careful because, of course, we can't diagnose now, but it sounds a lot like the way someone would describe a panic attack that takes over her. And at one point, she writes to her father, I had another one of those episodes, and I was presented with this bill. And my friends, who I trust, told me that I said, I want to pay this bill. I want to treat you or whatever. I have no recollection. It must have happened when I was in one of my episodes. So it's like amazing to
Wow.
me, yeah, what the struggles she was dealing with.
And did you find any roadblocks?
I mean, definitely, right? I think, ooh, if I could go back to the Shippen family and say, please don't burn those letters, right? So, I mean, I haven't found, it doesn't seem that there are any family letters or documents from the time pretty much that Peggy marries Benedict Arnold until she begins writing after she leaves Philadelphia. And boy, wouldn't that be amazing? Because then we might get some insight into what she was truly thinking early in her marriage and leading up to the treason. And then there's, the general issue about finding primary sources on women. There's just so much written about the Revolutionary War and the military strategies, political, Abigail Adams, thank goodness, was right, such a prolific person. And to write about her experiences, Peggy has a cousin, whether she's once removed or second, I always get confused, but who's a few years younger than her, Nancy Hume, her first name Anne, but she went by Nancy Shippen, and she wrote a journal. And it's super interesting to get insights into what life was like at the time from her journal. But the lack of those primary sources for women are also a roadblock.
Yeah. Was Peggy Shippen ever in Rockland County?
Oh, yes. Peggy journeyed to West Point, and Benedict Arnold wrote this real detailed letter about, okay, this is your first night, this is your second night. If you don't make it that far, then this is where you stay the second night. Get out at every bridge and walk across in case the carriage falls off the bridge. It's really a very, very protective and detailed letter. But Joshua Het Smith, who's such an interesting player in all of this, right? She stays there, and Arnold came down to meet Smith early before Peggy arrived. It's not clear whether he really thought Peggy was going to be there or that was one of the ruses to get him down as he's trying to gather information and begin planning. He comes down and, when Peggy is there, so she traverses up. She's only at West Point really 12 days, I think. She arrives on the 15th. And then by the 26th or 27th, I think it's the 27th, she's heading back in a carriage through Rockland. Philip Van Cortlandt writes that he sees this carriage going through and he has a sense somebody important is in there. And he says, like, who's in there? And the answer is, oh, that's Benedict Arnold's wife. So, she's definitely traversing through. And then she's going to stay just to the south on both ways, actually, in Hohokus with Theodosia Prevost, who will become Theodosia Prevost Burr. And that's an interesting kind of chapter, what Aaron Burr writes about her, et cetera. So everyone in Rockland would have been very much aware of who she was. Smith says, oh, I can get you a nice feather bed for when she comes and I can have it shipped up. So there was quite an awareness about her presence there.
Interesting. So you're coming to the Historical Society in September, and for that event, you'll be portraying Peggy. In other words, you give your presentation in the first person. I love this method of teaching history. Why do you like doing it?
I think that living history adds this element of emotions and human nature. So it's not just about what happened, but maybe there's a little glimpse of, why someone did that or how they felt about something. It's just like this energy. I've had people cry during my portrayal of Peggy. And I've teared up myself a few times because of being able to really put yourself in her shoes and think about, that emotion where somebody is really seeing her, maybe just for a minute, right? But and not as this 18th century historical figure, but a woman dealing with issues that some of us ourselves face today, right? So there's that connection. And the other thing I really like about it is that for at least half of the time in any one of the like what portrayals or sessions, it's discussion and Q&A. And that goes in different directions every time because people come with their own knowledge and questions and they're so curious and everyone really leans into this complex story. So I just think it's very satisfying for me and it's really a nice engaging way to learn history together.
I look forward to being there. This is a little sneak preview. Any final thoughts?
Well, I think touching on something you said before, Claire, I don't know about you, but when I was 17, I was a really different person than who I am now. So, I hope that people will remember who they were at 17 and be open to hearing there's a lot more to learn about the woman that Peggy Shippen Margaret Arnold became.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me today. And we will see you in September.
That sounds great. I can't wait.
Keep in mind that all the information we discussed will be available in the show notes. I hope you will tune in to the next Crossroads of Rockland History, which will begin streaming on Monday, July 20th. Check out the Historical Society's website, where you can learn all about events and programs coming up. Our web address is rocklandhistory.org, or call us at 845-634-9629. That's rocklandhistory.org or 634-9629. Another great way to keep up with us is to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads, or read our blog on Tumblr. And don't forget that past episodes of Crossroads, and there are over 180 of them, are archived at rocklandhistory.org as podcasts. And you can also find episodes archived on all major podcast platforms. I'm Clare Sheridan. Thanks for listening to Crossroads of Rockland History.